talk about something that doesn't get enough attention. I'm talking about the fact that cars are out there driving themselves. Is this not absolutely wild to anyone else? So you're a teenager, which means you were definitely alive before this was a reality. It also means you probably heard of one of the people who made it possible, Elon Musk. He had his team build electric vehicles that save the planet and save you the stress of cutting off people in traffic. The car literally does both for you. But this is happening with more than just cars. Every year, more and more of our life goes on autopilot. Everyday tasks and activities that can be done for us automatically by AI, machines, or even robots. It sounds like science fiction, but you already know how real it is. Bakeries are being replaced by cupcake vending machines, complicated banking is replaced by auto pay, and grocery shopping, or really any type of shopping, has been replaced by Amazon Dash buttons or Instacart. I can have pretty much anything I want delivered to my house at the drop of a hat. Crumble cookies on DoorDash, Nike Air Forces from Amazon Prime, a bunch of wildflowers and organic peanut butter from Whole Foods. I order it and it'll be at my house within minutes, hours, or maybe even a day. There are vending machines for cars. Have you ever heard of Carvana? It's a legit vending machine for a car. They currently have 33 Carvana vending machines across the country. You put in your money and bam, you get a car. So wild, right? And this idea of outsourcing everyday tasks in our lives, it seems convenient. But what happens when we start living our whole life on autopilot? We go through the motions. We wake up, get to our classes, do our homework, make it through practice, and hit our bed at night, and do it all over again the next day. Yes, there are moments of excitement along the way, like when we get to go to a concert or spend time with our crush, or move up the leaderboard on our favorite video game. But for the most part, we're coasting. We're watching the world happen through the windshield of our life on autopilot. And if we do this, things can get dark pretty quickly. Living on autopilot can eventually cause us to feel down. Because if we're honest, a lot is going on in the world that's not great. And when we're on autopilot, that's all we see. Bad news pops up as we scroll. People at school tend to talk about tough or controversial topics more than anything, and drama gets most of the attention from our friends. It feels like we're constantly reminded of how bad life is for other people in broken situations. Soon, it begins to feel like that's all that there is. Others of us may not struggle with what I just described, but even though our outlook might be a bit more positive, we still feel like we go through the motions. Our routine, friends groups, the walls of our high school, they just seem so blah. It's not that it's all awful. It's that they're all the same day in and day out. Life just feels repetitive, boring, and kind of like we're walking on a treadmill, never really taking us to a different place. This kind of autopilot leaves us thinking something like, there just has to be more to life than this. We know deep down that we were made for more. We crave a way to get the most out of our life, but we're not really sure how to make it ourselves and get to it. Whether we struggle with this feeling all the time or just in certain seasons of our life, we all know what it's like to live on autopilot. And let's be honest, this is not the life that we really want. So what is the life that we do really want? Well, I did a bit of Googling, and I found the answer to this question, at least according to music. From Kanye West to Frank Sinatra, I looked up songs with the good life somewhere in them. And here's what they have to say about what the good life looks like. Fun, food, money, cars, big cities. The Queen, Rihanna herself, summed it up this way a while back. You're going to be a shining star in fancy clothes and fancy cars, and then you'll be going so far, because everyone knows who you are. So live your life. You're steady chasing that paper. Brilliant. John Denver said, life is so good. Life is so good these days. Those old-timers got straight to the point. And your older brother's favorite country singer, Kenny Chesney, says, life is good, the grass is green, the good Lord is smiling on you and me. Said like a true country music icon. But come on, let's be real here. This isn't what life looks like for most of us. It isn't attainable. We also know plenty of people who've achieved this version of the good life and still seem miserable. They may be rich and famous, but they're living with that same sense of autopilot as the rest of us. So, if this is the best that's out there, then we must look for something different. Deep down, we're looking for a different kind of good life. How in the world can we find it? Jesus, the man who claimed to be God in human form and lived a couple thousand years ago, might have an idea. Jesus said a lot of things during his years of teaching, but there is one statement that speaks directly to what we're talking about today. His friend John thought it was so important that he included it in his biography of the life of Jesus, which is now called the Book of John in the Bible. Jesus was in the middle of explaining who he was and how he would set all of humanity right with God when he said this: "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Jesus says, there's a way of life out there that leads to hurt and pain and sadness, but I'm here to show you how you can live the good life. I can show you how to get the most out of this life that you have. That's a bold statement. Jesus claimed to be the one who could truly show us how to live the good life. Years later, a guy named Paul, one of the most influential Christian leaders in history, explained a little more about what Jesus meant when he said this. In Paul's letter to the Christians in Galatia, he lays out what it means to follow Jesus and experience all that he came to earth to make possible. Before he gets there, Paul tells us what comes naturally to us as human beings, kind of what life can start to look like if we live on autopilot. He writes, "It is obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex, a stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage, frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness, trinket gods, magic show religion, paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competition, all-consuming yet never satisfied wants, a brutal temper, an impotence to love or be loved, divided homes and divided lives, small-minded and lopsided pursuits, the vicious habit of depersonalizing everything and everyone into a rival, uncontrolled and uncontrollable addictions, ugly parodies of community." I could go on. Yikes. Subtlety was clearly not one of Paul's strong suits. And I don't know about you, but that is a list of things that I don't want anything to do with. Not to throw shade, but this doesn't sound at all like the good life. In fact, it sounds a lot like the kind of life we can easily fall into when we're on autopilot. So what's the alternative? What is the good life? Paul tells us this in the next verse. "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." That's more like it. These words characterize Jesus' life on earth. And in fact, when we see these things in ourselves, in others, and in the world around us, we can be sure that we're seeing God at work. And isn't that the life we really want? The stuff Paul writes about here, the stuff Jesus demonstrated with his own life, that stuff does sound like the good life. Who doesn't want more love, joy, peace, forbearance, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control? We want more of those things in ourselves, in our relationships, in our world as a whole, because they lead to the good life. And the good news is that Paul is very clear about how we get them. He says that they are the fruit of the Spirit, meaning what naturally comes from the Spirit. And the Spirit that Paul's talking about is the Holy Spirit, the power that Jesus promises to his followers. The Spirit is the very real presence and power of God. We often talk about God as Father and Son, meaning Jesus, but the Holy Spirit is just as much God as the Father and Son. The Spirit is who lives in us, giving us the power to help us live a life full of fruit, and that is what Paul mentions. Ultimately, the Spirit is helping us live more like Jesus because those good things are what his life was full of. That might sound strange, but spirituality is actually a big part of Christianity. There is more to being a Christian than just believing certain things and trying really hard to do what God says is best. Something supernatural is happening, even when we can't see it. And that's where the Holy Spirit comes in. Here's another way to think about that. As Christians, the Spirit lives in us, at the core of who we are. The Spirit is the force inside of us, moving us towards a life that is more in line with God and what Jesus demonstrated in his own life. The Spirit works to make us who we are and who we were always meant to be, taking our autopilot lives and making something bigger, something good, something fuller, just like Jesus mentioned. We'll unpack a little bit more of this in the coming weeks, but for now, this is Paul's big idea about the way to really live the good life. Paul says that what's natural for us is not what's best. Then he says that we get what we really want in life through the supernatural helper, the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit guides you to the good life. The Holy Spirit is a better guide through life than autopilot. The Spirit steers the way, and we partner with the Spirit to experience the good life that God has in mind for us. Let's talk about how to make this a reality. There are 2 steps that we can take this week. 1, turn off autopilot. It's easier to go through the motions and get through your days, but it's not the best thing for you. Getting off autopilot is all about awareness. It's about paying attention. Where is your life headed? What is guiding you and leading you? And the way that you think and act. Are you directed more towards Paul's first list or the fruits of the Spirit? If we'd say the first list, then chances are autopilot is moving us towards what's natural. Going with the flow, doing the things on Paul's first list, it does come naturally. I get it. I've been there. It's easier, but it's a dead end. Instead, we can acknowledge today that where we're headed isn't where we want to go. We start by being honest about where we are now and getting off of autopilot. Then, 2, we choose another way. The good life starts when we choose to go on a different way than the life that we have. God gives us a chance to choose. We can easily stay on autopilot and head where culture, society, and the algorithm takes us, or we can choose to turn off autopilot and go a different way, the way of the Spirit. Will this be easy? Not always. Changing the way we're living day to day takes time. But because of the Spirit, we aren't doing this on our own. And that's the good news. So if you're brand new to the idea of Christianity, start by asking someone like your small group leaders what it means to be following Jesus and experiencing the Spirit guiding you. And if you've been around for a while and you've found yourself back on autopilot in life, then maybe it's time to choose to take this part of your life seriously again. To begin not just believing, but living differently because of what you believe about Jesus. You can start to choose a different way by asking yourself, where did I see God today? We can be aware. We can turn off autopilot. We can choose another way in the coming weeks. We will talk more about what this other way looks like and how the Holy Spirit guides us to experience it. Just imagine living the life Paul described, a good life motivated by the Spirit. Imagine you found a way to turn off autopilot and get the most out of life. Imagine if there was a better way to do junior high or high school. This could change everything. You would begin to see God creating more of the good life, the good things that Paul mentioned around you. And you'll have a huge head start on people like me who can only wish we would have taken this more seriously at your age. The good life is possible. Let's do that. Now is the time to live the good life. When you head to small groups, think about your responses to this question. How would you describe life on autopilot?